Your Royal Highness, you have worked in the energy sector for decades and know this sector really well. When you have followed the discussion also here at our annual meeting, there is very clear that to meet the Sustainable Development Goals, to eradicate all extreme poverty, we also have to have energy for the 1.3 billion people on our planet that don't yet have electricity. At the same time, you have to decouple this growth also from the growth in CO2, then climate change. So very much looking forward to hear from you. Is it possible to deal with this, or is this a catch-22 situation?
No. First of all, I'm glad to be here, and I really had the pleasure yesterday of having a very productive exchange on that fossil fuel session. It was very productive and very engaging, and I hope that this platform can enable us to all to share our thoughts and ideas in the freedom that we need to, otherwise we would not be conceived as responsible citizens of this world. We're not newcomers to the G20. The fact that we were, from the first inception of the idea of the G20, Dr. Assaf is here and I are the old-timers here that can tell you a lot about since the day we were embarking in our journey of the G20. I think it came from all of our partners in the G20 as a recognition of Saudi Arabia of being a responsive player in the international world arena, both in multi-spheres, political, economical, and more important, in the energy sphere. This is where we have our niche, and this is where we have executed our and conducted ourselves in a manner consistent with, first and foremost, our own national aspirations and goals, and also being cognizant of the fact that as a supplier of energy, you really have to be mindful of what your customers and clients requires of you, expect of you. We're going beyond that by demonstrating in many occasions our ability to be the savior of the so-called concept of energy security. Still, until today, there is only one country in the world that have an excess capacity which is usable, and it has been used quite a few times as a way to mitigate any shortages of supplies that could have emanated from multi reasons. One of them is wars, conflicts, and economic disasters, and what have you, including industrial disasters. Be it as it may, we've been engaged, and we've been engaged proactively. The complexity of our engagement in the G20 emanates from the fact that we cannot see sustainable development, energy accessibility, and sustainability of energy supply and energy security, and all the components, including market stability, including sustainable energy systems as opposed to system, cannot happen without also being involved in the other debate, which has to do with climate change. And therefore, we as a Ministry of Energy, we are the handler of both. Energy, with all these 4 items that has been the issue of G20 discussions, and along with how you can do all of the above, yet maintain a good course of action in trying to attend to the issue of climate change in the most comprehensive way. Obviously, as a host of the G20, you need to be proactive, engaged, and also you should be mindful of the other attendants' aspiration, priorities, and if you are to be a good host, an engaging host, you have to be forthcoming with ideas and suggestions, and also you have to be attentive to others' ideas and suggestions. We elected to go the extra mile by even going further and saying we have things to showcase as Saudi Arabia. We have things to demonstrate as Saudi Arabia, that we are not as the oil producer that is scared of demonstrating, exposing ourselves to the world. In fact, we would like to take this opportunity to demonstrate and exercise our ability to showcase what we are doing. And we honestly believe that if the whole world see what we are doing back home, attending to our own energy requirements, I would be not surprised at all that people think of this as what a reasonable, a sensible, responsible producer should do. In fact, I would not go beyond that. I think even consuming countries would take us as a model for what they could do. And I'll give you a few. You cannot attend to energy sustainability and security and accessibility and stability without looking at every option there is. We have to agree amongst ourselves that we have to be energy neutral, energy source neutral, that we will take all of the above choices. We will make sure that the winner takes it all through economic prism, through analysis, through feasibility studies. We cannot fiddle with the world energy mix without agreeing that we have to let this choice be going through what we have been taught by universities, which is feasibility study and the ability of people to accommodate to what is they're being naturally endowed with. We are well endowed with oil and gas and the sun, so we're making use of both, of the three of them. We also cannot sit on our hand as a producer and without advocating something that can bring solutions to the emission issues. We're cognizant of that fact. We're doing a lot of work. So we're doing as Saudi Arabia, but here we are talking about the G20 work. Otherwise, I would have spent hours explaining to you what we're doing in Saudi Arabia. However, we want to make sure that the world focus on every source of energy. We want to make sure that we eradicate energy poverty. Your number is correct about the billion. I'll give another number. 2.6 million of this world's citizens do not have accessibility to even a clean cooking fuel. Mainly it is in Africa and some in how could you talk about energy accessibility and when you have a big issue of energy poverty and when you have even the least meaningful way of cooking is not in existence, which is more important? And that tells you a lot about the differences between priorities between the various players. So we want to make sure that if we are to be attentive to, yes, supply the world with every energy source there is, yet we have to mitigate emissions because, again, we owe it to ourselves, to the generations to come, that this world has to attend to all gases that cause climate change. And we use the word plural because it's not fair. There are things that are coming from industrialization, from the use of oil and gas, from the source of extraction, production, to the transportation, to all the way to the wheel. So it should be from the well to the wheel. And we can prove to the world that we're doing it all. We want to make sure that the whole world congregate around that principle. But we also want to make sure that the whole world congregate on we have to mitigate every source of emission and every gas emitted that do impact the climate change. And that's why we are advocating too many things. First, we will demonstrate within the next 2 months that we have a national program which has to do with circular carbon economy. I think we believe strongly in circular carbon economy as a way forward to mitigate almost all of these gases that are coming from hydrocarbon sourced, including the carbon sequestration, including the whole process. In that endeavor, actually, we and others will be creating sources of industrialization. I know Norway is involved in carbon sequestration along with us. We want to, on the environmental agenda, again, we have 3 priorities. Managing emission from industry and food value chains, which, by the way, contribute to about 37% of these so-called emissions, and sustainable mobility. We have a place to showcase very soon, hopefully, in the form of NEOM. NEOM will be mainly renewable. We know that we're doing the work for NEOM on renewable. Hydrogen cars, you find it in NEOM. We are engaged in producing technologies that would harness the use of hydrogen. So, but mobility takes into everything, again, from the technology of providing you with more efficient fuel and more climate-friendly fuel. We're talking about the urban design of cities and how we can change that, including digitalization of the cities, just to make sure that it is enabling people to move without the impact that you see in urban cities, especially congested urban cities as Delhi or Bombay or even Riyadh nowadays. And there is also one low-cost approach, which is adaptation. Yesterday, the Colombian minister the energy Colombian minister was talking about what's wrong with mangrove, what's wrong with greening the whole world, what's wrong with putting more trees, what's wrong with coral beaches and protecting those. We owe it to the world even that there is so much desertification happening, and we should reverse that. We owe it that 20% of the, ever since the Industrial Revolution, 20% of the green area have gone. We owe it to the world that waste management and dumps should be attended to. I don't want to name countries by name, but there are miles and miles of dumping spots that needs to be cleansed and cleared to make sure that they become subject to irrigation and subject to farming, as opposed to being conceived as dumping spots. That's why we in Saudi Arabia have this initiative of 1 trillion trees to be grown by everybody. What we know of certainly that the G20 encompasses most of the world economy, 78% of the emissions, the numbers are so huge. So if the G20 countries cannot move that agenda with a view and a vision where it is fair, equitable, and cognizant of the concern of all parties to make sure that everybody has that sense of ownership and therefore they can buy in, I don't know what we should be doing.
Thank you, Your Royal Highness. Just a short follow-up question. We only have 3 minutes left, and then I go to the Finance Minister at the end, just to share with us what would be the measures of success with your G20 presidency. So you can prepare for that, Your Excellency. But Your Royal Highness, adaptation, mitigation, cost effectiveness. I have a question related to also carbon capture and storage. Today, carbon capture and storage is not cost effective. It's too expensive. But look at solar. 10 years ago, it cost 10 times as much as today. And the fourth industrial revolution, technology, more effective manufacturing processes has driven down the price of solar to 1/10. And we see also the kingdom taking leadership here. More is coming from solar. We have some storage issues all over globally. But what do you think is the feasibility of carbon capture and storage? How to make it cost effective? How much investments do we have? Could it follow the same path as we have seen with solar? And will this be part also of your G20 presidency? And then we'll move to the finance minister.
Well, there is a going concern now. I don't know if you know that Saudi Arabia, Norway, the US are involved in the carbon sequestration forum. And that forum actually brings all of us together, sharing ideas, experiences, and even we talk to the private sector as also a proponent. That's why Aramco is carrying on a project on carbon sequestration. We are actually pushing the envelope even way better. When we first engaged in that forum, I was honored to have ability to be somewhat opinionated, and I asked our friends from the US that why can't we be engaged in adding U to the CCS, which is utilization. Why? Because we know that Aramco is actually experimenting with the idea of using CO2 as a way to enhance oil recovery as opposed to using water. And we have a project that is being executed. Actually, it has been at work now. Then we moved into the idea of, well, utilization of CO2 can go beyond that purpose to converting C as a material. So we do have programs. Aramco is handling a project, but we will be advancing on some other ideas, which I'm not going to share because I want to keep it for ourselves alone. But the idea, carbon is not wasteful. Carbon is a material that can be put to good use. If you talk to material engineers, they will tell you a lot of things that can be produced out of C. I used that as a speech, but I'm not going to go back to it. But we are trying to monetize every element of this hydrocarbon resource that we have. There is a case to be made. The engineers are there that they say it is doable. The finance are saying it is doable too.
Small, short addition from His Royal Highness.
I can't help it. In every setting I've had, I keep saying, you can get your visa in 5 minutes. Seeing it is better than imagining it. Come over and visit.
Thank you.